bury them, and they're very often buried together with someone who's deceased, so with the body, in this case with the ashes, and this way it shows that we have holiness next to holiness, because even a book that's no longer usable still retains its holiness. So I want to, before we say the prayers, I want to say a few words about Ruth. Regrettably, I never got to know her, but I spoke to a few people, to Rahel, to Frank, to Robert, and I want to talk a little bit about this very special person. All of you know her, or knew her, as a pianist, a concert pianist, a very talented individual, and you certainly know her and knew her better than I do, in terms of her great talent, a child prodigy. At the age of 20, I think she was born in 1923, and in 1943 she won one of the most prestigious prizes, the Naumburg Prize in Music. So certainly she was among the greats in terms of her musical career. She lived for her music. It was something that was very, very close to her. Born in Vienna, she had a difficult childhood with the anti-Semitism that was there, and she came to America with her parents, and she, thank God, was able to escape the Hitler regime in Austria, and she was able to prosper here in terms of her great music talent. But I want to focus on Ruth as a model of a Jewish woman. The Talmud tells us that the Jewish people are known for three character traits. In Hebrew, we refer to that as they are Rahmanim, Baishanim, Gomei Chasadim. And what that means is Rahmanim means the Jewish people are known for their Rahmanus. Rahmanut means their mercy. They are merciful people. Baishanim, they are a very modest people. And Gomei Chasadim, they're very generous and they reach out to others. And I think that we can certainly say about Ruth that she expressed every one of these characteristics in her lifetime. Thank God she was granted a long lifetime. Unfortunately, the very end of her life was a very, very difficult one, and one in which she had a lot of pain and discomfort. But the vast majority of her years were years in which she was able to flourish and to make a real name for herself. If you go on the internet, you'll find a number of sites in which her name comes up as a prodigal musician, pianist, teacher, all of that, and those characteristics are reflected in the kind of life that she lived. The first one, as I mentioned, Rahmanim, the Jewish people are merciful people, and certainly she was a merciful person, a person who cared about others, who didn't think about herself. Whoever you speak to who knew her, I've heard this a number of times from people I spoke to, the first word that comes up is modest. And here was a woman, a merciful woman who cared about other people more than she cared about herself. She didn't have a rich home. She wasn't ostentatious. She was a woman who lived within a very modest kind of lifestyle, even though she could have accumulated much more money and lived more lavishly, but she didn't because her concern was more for others. So here she expressed her Rahmanis. Rahel told me that when she went to the hospital to visit her, that she would ask about Rahel and how she's doing, even though Ruth was in a lot of pain and discomfort. Nevertheless, her focus was on other people, and she cared more about how they're doing than about herself. So here is an example of her Rahmanis. Then Baishanim, as I said, means modesty. And here again, we find that because of her lifestyle, we can certainly say she was a modest person. She didn't want to make waves and show off, and she was happy to do her music. She was happy to interact with her students. She could have charged a lot more for her lessons, but she didn't. As Frank told me, that she would only charge a modest amount because that's the kind of life that she lived. And again, as I said, she wasn't interested in accumulating wealth. And now we come to the last of those three characteristics, and that is Gomle Chasadim. And Gomle Chasadim means kindness, reaching out to others. And when she would teach students, she was actually more interested in relating to them. Her students weren't just people paying her a fee for service. They were part of her family. Unfortunately, she never got married and didn't have a big family. From what I understand, she only had a cousin. But the students were her family, her extended family, and she reached out to them and she helped them as much as she could. She didn't take money from others who offered her to help her. She just received a modest fee for her lessons, from which I understand they were very good, and she gathered students around her who continued to relate to her, who loved her almost like a mother, and felt that they were part of her family, her extended family. And so this aspect of Gemilas Chesed, of reaching out to others and being generous, she certainly demonstrated that. So here, Ruth, we speak about how indeed you were a most Jewish person, even though we all know that you didn't have a religious upbringing and weren't observant, but certainly you demonstrated your Judaism through your character, your personality, and your reaching out to others, and I think that's wonderful. And I just want to conclude with a note about your name. The name Ruth, of course, is a biblical name, and it comes from the Bible. In Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, we have a book called the Book of Ruth. We all know that Ruth was the great-grandmother of King David, and I think it's the most appropriate name for someone like yourself, because you're the biblical Ruth, the progenitor of the greatest king of Israel, King David, and we're first introduced to David